Can I ask you, I mean, because you've been inside the Fox complex, or you've reported, you have deep connections and have reported out from there. You know, the arrangement between Trump and the National Enquirer was explicitly symbiotic, right? Literally saying, we want a story about Ted Cruz, go publish, go write one. And the National Enquirer would fabricate one, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that Trump even, does he have the access to even be able to have an arrangement like that at Fox News? I mean, he communicates directly with Sean Hannity.
Yes, he does with individual hosts, not with the network as a whole. Lachlan Murdoch, who runs Fox, is in Australia a lot of the year. He's not wired in the way that his father Rupert was, or the way that, you know, other moguls like David Pecker were. Lachlan doesn't want to be, but Lachlan wants to keep the business humming. And this is all about business. That's what exactly is the same with David Pecker and the Enquirer. This is entirely about a financial relationship. They believe they have a fiduciary, what's the word?
Fiduciary.
They believe this is the responsibility they have to the shareholders to keep the pro-Trump propaganda going, to keep the viewers watching. And then what you'll see on the air on Fox, when they interview voters, the voters are saying the exact same things that Jesse Waters is saying.
Right. Well, it's a feedback loop. I mean, from a legal perspective, this seems like terra incognito to some degree, right, Lisa? I mean, I was struck by last week when the jurors, literally multiple jurors, were saying, I'm worried about my safety. And Judge Merchan said, I am directing that the press simply apply common sense and refrain from writing about anything that has to do, for example, with physical descriptions of the jurors. That's just not necessary. It serves no purpose. I mean, he's asking the press, and that included the mainstream press, fairly.
Yes.
But, like, is his ability to circumscribe the amount of information put out there as it concerns the press reduced to just requests, or is there anything legally he can do to guard against this?
I think many of us in the press who were in that room took those requests more as a directive. As he continued in that court transcript, it became clear that it wasn't really much of a request at all. And there were some people in the room who were really bristling at what they perceived was an incursion on their First Amendment rights. That having been said, I want to go back to something that you and Brian were discussing about the feedback loop, because I do think that there is a point to the gag order in that you're cutting off some of that feedback loop. I noticed
the Trump of it all.
The Trump of it all, which is to say, you know, one of the things that struck me is Trump took something that he liked that Jesse Waters said at 5 o'clock. He added to it and made it more insidious. And then 3 hours later, that entire thing comes back out of Jesse Waters' mouth. To the extent that the gag order succeeds in interrupting some of that feedback loop where Trump gets amplified by conservative media, but also is taking from conservative media and that stack of articles, things that he likes.
Yeah.
That might be a good thing, particularly when the DA's office is arguing republication is a violation of the gag order in and of itself, which is something that Todd Blanche argued to the contrary. He said, you know, the gag order prohibits making statements or directing others to make statements. It doesn't prohibit publication. The DA's office almost laughed at that and said, Your Honor, this isn't a totally fair analogy, but defamation law prohibits republication. If you can be held liable for republishing somebody else's lies, why is it okay for him to do it in the context of this gag order?
But don't sleep on this. When he's sharing these lies from Fox, he's misinforming himself as well as his fans.
Yeah.
Like, he's actually getting a warped sense of this trial, of the surroundings, of why his fans aren't showing up to the courthouse, which cracks me up that he thinks that thousands are being denied entry when no one really wants to come. He's being misinformed.
Yes.
Which, by the way, really hurt his presidency, and it's hurt his post-presidency as well. All of us in our lives, we need someone to tell us the truth.
Yes.
To tell us when we got ketchup on our tie, or when there's hair dye dripping down our face. It doesn't seem Trump has that person. Instead, he has the opposite. He has these people that lie to him on television every day and every night. And I would argue that probably hurts him over time during this trial.
Do you think removing him from part of the feedback loop changes the sort of mendacity over at Fox? I mean, because Jesse Waters came up with these juror conspiracies independent of Donald Trump. Remember that Donald Trump theoretically just retweeted, an edited version of what Jesse Waters came up with. Right. And I just wonder, does the toxicity level decrease at all if the gag order is more punitive?
If it's enforced, which is the
that's
other
the
thing.
question.
And, I want to point out, Alex, something to you, because the dynamic between Merchan and Trump now is very much a parallel to the dynamic between Trump and Judge Lou Kaplan, who oversaw both E. Jean Carroll trials. There was a moment, and excuse me, because I'm reading from an NBC News article.
You're allowed to use your phone.
Where At the last trial, he said, Mr. Trump, I hope I don't have to consider excluding you from the trial. I understand you are very eager for me to do that. And as Trump was walking out of the courtroom, I remember him like sort of pounding the table and go, I would love that. I would love that.
Well,
and that's sort of the dynamic that's going on with Merchan, and Merchan knows that too. And so the trick for him is to hold out the stick without actually hitting Trump with it.
Well,
but be credible.
And that is something, I mean, we started this segment talking about the ways in which Trump is running right up to the line. Right-wing media is saying, go get arrested, sit in the cell for 6 hours. It's not only going to be great for your brand, it's going to be great for fundraising. We have details. I think Trump raised $5.6 million in the first week of the hush money trial, an average of $1 million a day. He knows where his bread is buttered on this.
It's so perverse that all of a sudden these law and order Republicans care deeply about the humanity of the criminal justice system. Right? Jesse Waters is comparing Trump's treatment to Guantanamo Bay prisoners. I fantasize, and I know that's not going to happen, that we're going to see some movement as a result to actually improve the prisons and the courthouses and all of the rest. I know it's not going to happen, but it's incredible to see how they're waking up all of a sudden to what it's actually like to be a criminal defendant.
Right. Well, it's as it concerns one particular person who might face jail time.
They're God. That's what this is about. They are worshiping their cult leader.
Why haven't we gotten a ruling from Judge Merchan on this gag order yet?
Well, Judge Merchan is a very, very careful jurist. He said yesterday at the end of the hearing that he wanted the parties to give him any additional authority that they wanted to bring to his attention. You'll recall that he invited Todd Blanche to cite case law to him that said essentially that republication was not a violation of the gag order. He did not. So both parties had an invitation to give him more between Tuesday night and today. I suspect we'll see something from Judge Merchan tomorrow or Friday in writing that he'll read from the bench and then make available for the public to see. In the meantime, the DA's office has told us they're going to file a third order to show cause with respect to some additional statements. And then just yesterday, while we were at the trial, Donald Trump, I guess before the trial, must have done an interview with a news outlet in which he said some of the same things about Michael Cohen that have gotten him in this pickle in the first place. So, you know, the escalation is happening even before the verdict or the ruling comes out on these existing violations.
Yes, poking the bear quite literally. Well, hopefully the guardrails will narrow tomorrow when the trial begins again with Dave Pecker on the stand. Lisa Rubin, Brian Stelter, no two better people to talk about this with. Thank you both for your time and wisdom this evening.